Hello, hello. Welcome back.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Living Richly with Curo, episode number 33. My name is Anne McCabe. I am the CEO and a partner here at Curo Private Wealth, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely partner, Atrisa.
Hello, I am Atrisa Roberts, COO and partner here at Curo.
Yeah, so happy to have you back for another episode. Our goal here is always to inspire, educate, empower you on your financial journey. And today we're going to be talking about the big question of to buy or to lease a car. And both Teresa and myself are kind of car people.
Yeah.
So we're excited. We're excited to talk about cars. It's kind of a problem because cars,
Yeah.
not a good investment, people, not a good investment. But we're going to talk about smart ways to decide to make this decision about a car. So, before we do that, though, we always love to do a little A team catch up. Now, for our listeners and viewers, this is our second consecutive day recording. We got a little, push because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So I'm not sure we have a lot to catch up on, but anything to share? I actually do have something
Oh, well,
interesting to share
good.
with you, but
Good. Go
you
first.
start. Are you
No, you
sure?
start. I'm so sure.
Okay. So I actually came across an article that CNN put out of the top Wikipedia pages for 2024. There's the top 25 most viewed. I want you to try to guess one of the pages that would have been in the top 5. The first one blew my mind. I'm like, I don't know who these people are who are reading this page, but some of them are pretty easy to guess considering the year that we've had. It's an
Yeah, I mean, I'm
election
assuming,
year.
yeah, something maybe about the candidates, Donald Trump or Vice President Kamala Harris. It maybe some of those pages. I'm thinking maybe politicians came up a lot. Am
Yep.
I
All right. You
close?
got you got number 2. So Kamala
Okay.
Harris was number 2. Trump was
Okay.
actually number 5. Okay. So you
Okay.
got number 2 and number 5. Number 1 though, again, I'm like, who are these people? Deaths in 2024 was the number 1 viewed page of Wikipedia. I'm like, wait,
That is so
what?
morbid.
44 million page views.
Deaths in 2024.
Yeah. I didn't even know that was a thing to like look at a Wikipedia page
I
about
wouldn't
deaths
have
in
even
2024.
considered that that's information I would wanna know.
I know. And I was thinking, like,
Wow.
before we hopped on, I was thinking, like, should I go to the page and just
And
see?
just see what's there.
But then I was like, no, no, I don't want that energy. So anyway,
Right.
now you know. Now you
Okay.
know. One of the most popular.
Interesting.
I wonder, it would be interesting to look back on like 2023, 2022, and see if that's like a thing that people just look at every year. I don't know. Or if it was something specific to 2024.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really interesting.
Wow. I always, I laugh at, like, my grandmother, and I always say it's a thing about age because she always just checks the obituaries in, like, their local
Yeah.
newspaper, but that's what
Yeah.
it makes me think of, like, are people just checking in to see who's still alive? It's so different.
I thought so too. I'm glad that you had the same reaction because I was like, wait,
Yeah.
what? I'm not surprised about Harris. I'm not surprised about Trump.
No.
Okay,
No, no,
so we
no.
got number 1, deaths in 2024. Number 2,
Yeah.
Harris. Number
Okay.
3, 2024 United States presidential election. Not surprising.
Okay.
Number 4, Lyle and Eric Menendez. So this is all the rage, the
Oh, yeah,
Menendez
yeah,
Netflix.
yeah.
Have you
The
seen it?
documentaries, I saw a couple of the episodes of the series because someone else whose home I was at was watching it, but I haven't, like, sat and watched the entire thing all the way through.
Yeah. Part of me wants to watch it, and part of me is like, I get terrified when it's true stories about complete
Yeah.
sociopaths.
Yeah, but apparently there's a whole, like, social media, TikTok contingent of people who are supportive of them and have been trying to help free
Mm.
them, and so I wouldn't have thought of it, but I guess I'm not surprised that that's one of
Yeah.
the top Wikipedia searches this year.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised about it either because I didn't know
Yeah,
about the social media bit, but I know lots of people are talking about it, and I think people who
right.
have watched it are like, "It's legitimately interesting." It's too dark for me to watch,
Yeah.
but, okay, so that's number 4, and then number 5 is Trump. So I would say, like,
Okay.
most of those are not surprising, but yeah, the number 1, I just couldn't. was like, who are these people? Who are these 44.4 million people?
Yeah. I mean, I'll admit I am also a little concerned that there might be millions of people getting information about the election from Wikipedia, but here we are.
Here we are. Here we are. So anyway, I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting. So
Yeah,
that's my
no,
catch up for the
definitely
day.
interesting.
Yeah. Anything
Fun.
else you care to share?
Um, I'm trying to think. I mean, it's like the beginning of like holiday party season,
Hmm.
and like my calendar's stacking up. They're starting early. So, we have our team holiday event. I have my Queens on the Green, which is the golf group I'm a part of. Our holiday event is this weekend. And I feel like every time I look up, there's some new invitation or email for some holiday thing. And I'm like, wow, it's going to be a busy few weeks. I've got to learn how to say no, how to decline some of these invitations. But that's it. But I love a good reason to get dressed, and I love a cocktail party or a holiday party, so I always want to go. But the thing I'm challenging myself with, and this is interesting, I guess, for me, is that I'm challenging myself to not feel like I have to buy a new dress or outfit, because I am trying to monitor my consumption of just things, particularly clothes. Because I'm one of those people who, oh, here's a new event, I need a new dress, right? Here's a holiday party, I need a new dress. So I'm making a deliberate effort to revisit my closet and be like, you wore this dress 2 years ago. You can wear it again. It's fine. You don't need a new dress for this event. So I'm trying to work really hard on being better about not having to buy a new dress for all of the things I'm doing this season.
Yes. This is where you know that I love the concept of renting clothes
Oh yeah.
also, because this gives you an opportunity. I mean, I think it's totally fine to rewear something that you wore even
Yeah.
last year or the year before. You can also like add an accessory or wear different
Right.
shoes or, make it
Yeah.
look different than the way that you wore it last time. But I'm also a huge fan of renting clothes for this exact reason, because
Yes.
it's so much better for your wallet. It's so much better for the environment. Like so many clothes end up in dumps, right, all
Yeah.
over the world and
That find themselves in the ocean, find their ways to the
in the
ocean,
ocean.
which is
Yeah,
terrifying.
terrible, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this is a perfect time in the
Hmm.
holidays of where, considering renting clothes may make sense also, because if especially if you're just planning to wear it, one or two times.
Yeah. And the other part too is that you get to change the look and do something different without feeling guilty about it. It's much more
Yep.
affordable to just rent it. And then it goes back and doesn't end up in a box somewhere in the back of your closet.
Yeah, exactly. So looky there, we had so much to
We
catch
had
up on,
something.
and it's
Yeah.
only been 24 hours. So not surprising. All right, so let's get into our topic du jour, where we are going to talk about to lease. I was going to say rent, basically same thing. To lease or to buy a car. So we are going to start with the basics, and forgive us for a moment if we're starting too elementary, but just to make sure we're all on the same page, we are going to start with what does it mean to buy versus what does it mean to lease, just in case you're not 100% aware of what the differences are. So when you buy a car, this means you are either paying cash outright for the car and then you own it, or you are financing. So you're taking out a loan and you're paying for the car over time. And once that loan is paid off, then you own the car. So this means you can do whatever you want with the car. You can sell it, you can trade it in, you can keep it. So you own it, you have full control over that car. You're also responsible for, things like maintaining the car and all of that as well. So leasing is like renting. So you pay a monthly fee for the privilege of using the car for a period of time. So most leases are going to be somewhere in the 2 to 4 year range. But at the end of that term, when the lease is up, you either turn in the car, at which point you no longer have a car and you probably need to figure something out if you need a car, or you can decide to buy out the lease. So that is another option. But those are the real key differences between buying and leasing. So let's start with leasing and when leasing makes sense. And the way, hopefully, you know this if you've been listening to us for a while, the way we like to approach these decisions is never like this is bad, this is good. It's always there are trade offs, there are pros and cons to each approach. So we like to educate you on what those trade offs are, when you may consider one versus the other. So let's start with when leasing may make sense.
Yes. So, one of the first things to consider when a lease might make sense is if you are the type of driver who likes driving a new car every few years. There are people who are car people who always want the latest and greatest in technology in their car, which we know changes very rapidly in vehicles. So leasing allows you to upgrade regularly. As Ann already mentioned, most lease agreements range somewhere between 2 and 4 years where you turn in that vehicle. And unless you're buying out your lease to keep the car, then you make a decision on whether you lease another one or you purchase another one going forward. But it allows you to upgrade your vehicle pretty regularly. Also, leasing makes sense if you don't drive a lot. So now leases come with mileage limits. Typically, it's around 10 to 15,000 miles per year. If you go over that mileage limit, then you will pay extra and a fee for that lease. So if you are a person who doesn't do a lot of road trips, if you don't have a job that keeps you on the road a lot, then leasing may also make sense for you. If you prefer lower monthly payments, and this is where we start talking about cash flow, sometimes the lower payment makes more sense for your cash flow situation. Lease payments are often lower than loan payments because you're paying for the car's depreciation during the term lease and not the full value of the car, which is very different. It also means that you typically can afford to lease nicer cars or more expensive cars because you are not paying that lease payment based on the value of the car, but on its depreciation over the time that you're leasing it. And then if you want fewer maintenance worries, most leases align with the manufacturer's warranty. So most major repairs are usually covered. So again, nothing is good or bad, but these are things you want to consider as to whether or not a lease makes sense for you. And I will offer an example. We have a client, and she is an older woman who doesn't move around much more than around her neighborhood, going to the grocery store, those kinds of things. And we were making the decision on whether or not she should buy a new car or lease a car. And as we talked about her lifestyle, right, wanting the lower payment, not driving around a lot, it kind of made sense that a lease worked out better for her than buying the same vehicle because she already had the car in mind that she wanted. So again, it's about considering your lifestyle, considering your goals, what makes sense for you. But that's usually where leasing fits if you fall into any of those ranges.
Yeah. So that sounds pretty good, right? I mean, those are a lot of, I would say,
Yeah.
positive things
Yeah.
in the leasing category, but it does have its drawbacks, of course, like anything. So
Mhm.
now we're going to talk about when buying makes sense for you. And a lot of this, to Atrice's point, comes back to your lifestyle. So, first thing, as a counter to what Atrice was talking about, if you
Mhm.
don't drive a lot, if you do drive a lot, and I am in that camp with my kids between school and hockey and activities and whatnot. There is no way I could lease because I would be like blowing through that $15,000 mileage probably in like 4 months. So if you are like me and you are constantly driving and you are putting quite a few miles on your car, then we would say that in and of itself is probably going to be a no go for leasing for you. Number two, if you want to build equity, so you don't like the idea of getting to the end of your lease contract and not having a car and having to figure out what to do for a new car, but you want to be able to own the car and build that equity, then buying may be a good option for you. Third, if you want to save money in the long run, then consider buying because even though buying means higher payments in that short run, higher payments than leasing, by the end of the term of, the loan or obviously if you pay cash, then you're payment free. And having no car payment is a pretty lovely thing, especially if you're used to having a car payment and then you don't. So by the end of, when you pay the car off or if you pay cash, you have no payment and now you actually own an asset in the car. And then lastly, if you like customizing your ride, so maybe you want a roof rack on your car or you want a custom stereo or something like that. These are things that you cannot do to a leased car. You may not customize them like that because if you turn the car back in, the dealer needs to be able to resell it. So those are some reasons why you may want to consider buying over leasing.
Yeah. And I always like to point out when people are buying cars is to always pay attention to the APR or your interest rates, because for a lot of people, probably for most people, you're financing that purchase. And the idea in buying the car is that you are able to build some equity. But just like with mortgages, you can find yourself underwater on an auto loan as well. So you want to make sure you understand what your down payment is, what that means for your monthly payment, what your interest rate looks like, so that when you do get to the end of that term, there is actually equity. Or even if during the term you choose, oh, well, I need a new car. Right now you've had children and you need an SUV versus the sedan you were driving, and you go to trade it in and you realize that the value hasn't kept up with the financing. So just be mindful of those things when you are purchasing a car, especially if you're financing one.
Yeah, and on the loan terms, I mean, I've seen car loans now that are like 6, 7. I think I
Mm-hmm.
saw an 8-year an 8-year
Ugh.
car loan. So rule of thumb here, if you can't afford the payments, I would say like max 5 years. Do you agree with
Yes.
that? Max 5
Yeah.
years for a car loan?
Yes.
Max. Like
Maximum
ideally
60
yeah,
months.
exactly. Ideally 4, but max 5. If you can't afford the payments on a car and you have to push that loan out to 7 years, 8 years, like that should be a red flag for you. You cannot afford this car. You should not move forward. This is probably not a smart financial decision in the long run. You will probably find yourself in that situation, like Atrice was mentioning, where you are underwater. So it's also important, just because the numbers work on a higher term loan does not mean that is a smart decision for you to take.
Right. And the value of cars depreciates so quickly, right? We know as soon as you leave the lot, you've already lost value in those cars. And if you're stuck in a auto loan that's 7 or 8 years long, there's a good chance that your car isn't even worth worth it at that point, right? After 7 or 8 years, because technologies advance so quickly and there's always new models released every year. So just be mindful of that when you're looking at financing terms. So here's some questions to ask yourself when you're trying to make the decision to buy or lease. The first one: what is my budget? Always where we like to start, right, is what can I afford, right? Can you handle higher monthly payments if it means building equity, right? When you're talking about buying a car, but it's always about what you can afford, what you can accommodate in your budget. You don't want to stretch yourself so thin on either a lease or a loan payment on a car, just to be able to drive something nicer, right? So consider what it is that you can actually afford. How many miles do you drive annually? This is a big part of that decision. As Anne already shared, she does way too much driving to even consider a lease. Me, on the other hand, I live 8 minutes from where I work. I don't.
Not to brag, not to brag.
Right. I drive maybe 2 miles, right, between where I live and the office. I mean, I hang out on the weekends, but I don't do road trips. I don't have small children that I'm moving around between practices and schools. So maybe because I drive less miles than Ann, a lease may actually make sense for me. But that's a big one to consider. And then how long do you plan to keep the car? Some people are don't as long as the car goes, right? I have people, you hear the expression, I'm going to drive it till the wheels come off. If you're
Yeah.
that kind of person where you just want something that is reliable and gets you from point A to point B, then buying the car probably makes sense. If you're a person who always wants the newest, latest, and greatest model or upgrade in something, and all of the other factors fit, then maybe a lease makes sense. But those are just questions to ask yourself as you're making that determination.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, lastly, we've got some pro tips for you. So, prior to even showing up at the dealership, our first pro tip is you must do your research. So, there is no excuse this day and age. Everything's online, right? I mean, you can find pretty much anything. So, do your research ahead of time. Obviously, you want to research different car models, you want to read reviews of other owners of the cars. If you're my mom, you're going to Consumer Reports. She's like a huge fan of Consumer Reports. She's like, "Oh, you're buying a new vacuum. I need to give you a Consumer Reports." But on a car, Consumer Reports could be handy. And then also, you want to look at things like prices, because prices are going to vary dramatically once you get to the dealership. I would say we didn't specifically list this, but also I think a pro tip is like show up to the dealership towards the end of the month, where you know they're if they're short on hitting their quota, they're more likely to negotiate with you, which is our second point, and that is to negotiate. And we recommend that you actually negotiate the price of the car prior to telling the dealership whether you are going to buy or you are going to lease. Just say, I'm not sure. I haven't made
Hmm.
up my mind, but let's get to the best price we possibly can. Because there are, similar to financing or APR in buying when you're doing a loan, there are sort of interest costs as well in leasing. So it's really important to negotiate as much as you can the price of the car and then figure out, okay, or am I going to lease or am I going to buy? And then, obviously, as with any large purchase or financial decision, we want you to make sure you understand the fine print. So, if we're talking about the loan, like Atrisa mentioned, knowing that APR, understanding if you did pay off the loan prior to the 4 or 5 year term, are there any prepayment penalties? If we're talking about leasing, you want to make sure you understand what that mileage limit is. You understand what those fees are. You also understand if you return the car with, some door dings because you parked in a parking lot and got door dings, what does that mean from a potential cost standpoint?
Right. Wear and tear is a huge thing with leasing. And I always suggest to, and when you're walking into any car dealership, is to go in armed with as much information as possible and as much control as you can manage going in. So this is necessarily not a good option for leasing because not lots of banks will do it for leasing. But if you are considering buying a car, even getting pre-approved from your own bank, right? If you have a banking relationship and they do auto loan financing, walking into a car dealership with a pre-approval letter showing you how much you're approved for and what those terms look like, give you negotiating power because that dealer is going to want to beat those terms, and they will oftentimes make the accommodation to do so. And you also, and we talked about this in our last episode when we were talking about choosing a credit card, it's probably also helpful to know your credit score walking in to buying or leasing a car. Leasing tends to favor people with better credit, with better
Hmm.
credit scores. So knowing where you stand in that before you go in either decision is always really helpful. Be armed with as much information and power and control as you can. As you can probably already tell, I am intimidated in car dealerships. I always feel like they're out to get me anytime I walk in. So as much
I'm surprised to hear
control.
you say intimidated. I think I would say skeptical.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's the better word.
Skeptical, yeah,
Yeah,
skeptical that you think they're gonna try to sell you, or that you
yeah,
think that
absolutely.
that you don't know what you're talking about, or that they can take advantage of you, but I
Absolutely.
don't see you walking in being
No.
intimidated.
Yeah, no, skeptical is the better word, but I always go in. I mean, I have like folders for information. Like, nope, I already have a pre-approval letter from my bank, and actually, my credit card lender offered me auto loan. Like, I have so many things. Okay, now what can you do? What can you do to make this better?
Yes, exactly. I think that's, yeah. And again, there's no excuse for not,
Yeah,
because there is so much information and so much legwork you can do ahead of time, really just to position yourself in the most ideal perspective when you're making this purchase.
yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'm sure both of us have probably bought or leased in the past, but
Hmm.
right now in your life, are you team lease or are you team buy?
Given the situation I'm in now, I'm lease. I'm leasing now for the same reasons that I mentioned. I don't drive a ton. I live close to home. I'm a car person and I like the latest and greatest in upgrades. The other reason why I made a decision to lease currently is because I switched to all electric. And I was very unsure of how that would work for me over the long term. I didn't want to make a commitment until I understood what the charging hassle is, like how easy it is to find charging stations when you're moving around. So I also made the decision to do it then because I didn't want to commit super long term to buying an electric car until I was certain. But prior to that, then I was buying a car, which worked out to my favor because, again, that was at a time when used car values were up. So I actually walked away from that car. I was able to sell that car for a lot more money than I thought. So I don't know. I mean, right now I'm team lease, but again, like most decisions, I think depending on who you are and where you are in your life, either one could really work. It's just about knowing what's best for you.
Yeah, such a good point. I mean, just because that's where you are now doesn't mean that's where you
Yes.
were in the past
Hmm.
or that's where you will be again in the future. So, yeah, I think that makes so much sense. And it really reiterates the points that we just made about understanding where you are, what your goals are, what your lifestyle is now, and what your plans are for this car, and then making a decision in line with all of those factors.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I
And we
am
already know
team
you're not team lease.
I mean, really. I got my current car in 2021 and it's got 54,000 miles on it already.
Yeah, you're moving.
I'm
You're moving.
moving and shaking. Those kids, I tell you, those kids will put some mileage on your car.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where I am. My goal is to keep this car because I like nice cars like you do. And so my goal is always to try to buy a car and keep it for 10 years. However, there is a certain brand of car that I potentially may get in the future. And it is a gorgeous, like just a beautiful specimen, but does not have the best ratings from like a maintenance perspective. And so I always said, if I get that car in the future, I will probably lease it because I don't want to have to deal with, 5 years down the road, I've got all sorts of maintenance costs. So yeah, I think it also, your point about the EVs is super astute also, because you just don't know what you don't know. You haven't had that experience. And so you're like, I'm dating
I'm
this EV.
dating,
I'm
right?
not
I'm
ready to
dating
get
the
married.
car, but it's going well. It's been a
Yeah,
year and a
good.
half. I absolutely love this car.
Okay. So we've got
It
like a ring on the finger.
Yeah,
We've got a ring on the
we're
finger.
engaged. We're betrothed. But yeah, no, it's going well. But yeah, that was one of the reasons I made the decision to lease is because I just wasn't sure. And I was like, we got to
Yeah.
feel this one out before we make a long-term commitment.
Well, you do have a beautiful car, so I
Thanks.
think it's okay for you to like move to the next step.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully that was helpful as always. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend who you know is in the market to buy or lease a car. You've heard them talking about how they need a new car. Please share this episode with them. Hopefully that will be helpful as they're going into that decision. So give us the ratings, the reviews, subscribe, all the things. Thank you as always for that support. And before we get into our closing thought of the day, yes, we want to remind you to send your questions into podcast@curoprivatewealth.com. If we answer your question on our podcast here, we will send you an Amazon gift card, $10 Amazon gift card. It's the holidays. Every Amazon gift card can be beneficial in this season. So send those questions in. We would love to hear from you. So that brings us to our closing thought. My closing thought is actually based on what you said about all the holiday events. So my LinkedIn video was about this a few weeks back, but so I'm gonna kind of repeat what I said in that LinkedIn video. But I think it is really important as we go in, and now we're not going in, we're like smack dab in the middle of holiday season, to make sure that we've got time on our calendars for the things that are priorities and that are important to us. And then whatever space is available after we make sure we've got time for the things that are really important. And, a lot of that is also self-care. We need to make sure we are taking care of ourselves as we go through this holiday season, because we don't want to totally deplete our batteries and get to January 1st, 2025 and feel like, we need a month to really get into the new year. So I think it's super important to make sure we are making time and being intentional about how we spend our time. And that may mean, I know you love parties and I love parties and we love getting dressed up, but that may mean that we have to say no to some things. And I think that's okay. But if we haven't taken the time to really be intentional about mapping out time for the things that matter to us, we may end up just filling it, right? So I'm sure you all have heard the analogy of the jar and the big rocks and the small rocks and the sand. If you fill your jar with all the sand, which in this example is like all the holiday parties and the things that we have to do, then you're not going to have any space for the big rocks, which are really the key priorities and important things in our lives. So it's important to put those big rocks in the jar first, and then the small pebbles, which are kind of, the other things, and then fill the jar with the sand. Because if you do it in the reverse, there will be no space for our big rocks.
Yeah, that's always a powerful, powerful thought. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned it because I just had a conversation with my sister yesterday. She was asking me, "Oh, how was your day?" And I was like, "Oh, it was nonstop." And she was like, "Did you eat?" And I was like, "Yeah, I squeezed in some food like between things because I mean, I think you and I both like ate off camera of another meeting."
Yeah, we were on a Zoom.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't you just block some time to eat in the middle of the day? You could just block time in your calendar for lunch. It's like, oh, guess I could. But I think it's right on target with what you shared, is that making the space, right, for the important things, but then also for the self-care things, the things you just need to be okay.
Yeah. Otherwise, I mean, you and I live in a world where if there is free space on our calendar, it will get booked.
It will
So
get
we
booked.
we have to make sure there is free space when there actually is free space.
Yeah, absolutely. So my closing thought, so this is my birthday month for those who don't know. I'm a December birthday, and by and by the time you hear this, it'll probably be a few days right before my actual birthday. But having a December birthday and then also being year end always makes me super reflective about the year, the last year since the last birthday. And I realized how incredibly blessed I am. And even with all of the challenges of this last year, how good it's been, right? How many wins, how many successes, how life just, it comes at you really quickly, but you manage, you fight through, you press forward, and you find yourself in, finding small wins every day. And I'm truly grateful for it. But in that reflection, I also realized that I have not made time to give back in the way that I would like to. And I'm always one of
Mm,
the people who believes that too much is given, much is required. And I feel like I've been given a lot over the last year. So I am also trying to make an effort to do some community service events, not just this holiday season, but finding ways to space it out periodically in my year next year to and
mhm,
again, we make monetary donations to things, and you may donate clothes or you may donate to a food bank, but to really get out and do some physical service, clean up
mm,
my neighborhood because I'm a person who hates litter and trash, or to go out and serve lunches, to do something that really serves mankind and serves other people. And because I've been so busy, I haven't done a ton of that this year, and I feel a little guilty about it. So
mhm.
I am making the decision to do more to give back this holiday season and also in the new year. And I'm encouraging everyone to at least consider doing the same.
I love that. Such a beautiful message. That's really one of the main things about the holiday season too, is
Yeah.
not just, the gifts and obviously
Right.
spending time with our loved ones, but also caring for people who are much less
Right.
fortunate than we are.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Thank you for inspiring.
Trying to inspire myself. So
Yeah, it's
hopefully I
good.
can
And now you have
inspire others along
accountability.
the way. Right.
Yeah, now you put it out there, which is always a great thing if you want to accomplish something.
Yeah.
So,
So if you guys want to send us a question to podcast@curoprivatewealth.com and ask me what service event I did before the end of the year.
boom. There, that is accountability right there. All right, y'all. Well, that wraps us for this week. Thank you, as always, for joining us. We love to hear from you. We love that you spend time with us. We're very grateful for you and our whole community and our firm. So, thank
Yes.
you again. We will see you back here next week. And until then,
Live richly.